James chapter 3. Let's read the middle chapter of the Epistle of James. This serves as background for our text, which speaks about bridling our tongues. James 3. My brethren, be not many masters, that is, teachers, as in headmaster, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation, or the stricter judgment from God. For in many things we offend all. If a man offend not in word, the same as a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us. We turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which, though they be so great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm or rudder, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beasts, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. Amen. James 1 verse 26 says, If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. What then is this text dealing with? It's speaking about a person in the church. It begins, if any man among you believers. The text speaks of an opinion about that man in the church, not what other people think about him, but what that person thinks about himself or herself. The text says, if any man among you in the church seem to be religious, And the seem here means seems to himself, as the latter bit in the text will show. If any man among you seems to himself to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth not his neighbour, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. In other words, James 1 verse 26 speaks of a person in the church who professes to be religious, a Christian, but is deceived because the person has deceived himself. If any man among you seems or thinks himself to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. That is, useless. That is, in short, what the text is saying. And the very obvious, simple, and direct application of this is, what about you here tonight? Does this description fit you? If so, says James, your Christian profession is vain, that is, useless, and in the absolute sense, the way in which this text is intended, first of all, it means downright false. You're not a Christian at all. Though we all sense, even as believers, that we deceive ourselves too, and that there's a lot more bridling of the tongue that we should have done, and we know that when we think, whoops, I shouldn't have said that. There I go again, sinning. Let's look tonight at vain religion. James here is describing vain, useless religion. Let's look at this under the 3 points: the unbridled tongue, the deceived heart, and the contextual rationale. That third point needs a little bit of explanation. It means, what's the reason for this being mentioned in this context? The contextual rationale. Vain religion, the unbridled tongue, the deceived heart, and the contextual rationale. Beloved, the imagery of the bridle that is used in our text, and also in James 3, verses 2 and 3 that we read earlier, the imagery of the bridle is taken from the equestrian world, which, for those who don't know that big word, means the world of horses. Because supremely, it is horses that are bridled. There's a bit in the mouth, and there's a bridle. It gets quite complicated. I looked it up on Wikipedia. There's all these names for different things, and different types of bridle and so forth. But there's the bit that goes in around here, and then there's the bridle that directs the horse this way and that, and can even be used especially to slow down the horse, or even part of stopping it. And so bridling something or someone is an image of directing it, or more broadly, controlling it. And you need to control a horse when you're on its back. It's a big, powerful creature. You need to be in charge. And so something that is not bridled, widening out now to other spheres from that of the equestrian world, something that is not bridled is something that is not under control. James 3 verse 3 refers to the bit. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, between the front teeth and the back teeth, in there. We put bits in the horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. James 1:26 talks about the bridle, and if any man among you seems to himself and also, therefore, to other people too, but that isn't primarily the idea, seems to himself to be religious, but doesn't bridle his tongue, then his religion is vain, because the tongue needs to be controlled or bridled. James 1 verse 26 identifies the unbridled tongue as the way in which a man or a woman's false profession is exposed. And I wouldn't have guessed that many, or even any of us, would have guessed that to be the thing presented in this text as the way in which somebody reveals to others, maybe even ultimately to themselves, that they're not actually saved. An unbridled tongue. Then you wonder, what does that mean, and why this sin? Why didn't James mention something else? If any man seem to be religious, but is exposed as a drunkard week in, week out, especially over the holiday period, well, you can pretty much conclude that either he's deeply backslidden or he never really was converted in the first place. Or, if any man is taken in the very act of adultery, he's exposed as a hypocrite. Although, sadly, sometimes even true believers have fallen into that sin. Or, if we find out that a brother is an extortioner and he's grabbing people by the lapels, throwing them against walls and trying to get them to cough up money to him, that'll expose that he wasn't really a child of God even in the first place. But the text doesn't actually say that. It says, if anyone doesn't bridle his tongue, his religion is vain. And in mentioning these other sins, that points up the fact that it's not only the unbridled tongue, of course, which could expose someone as a false professor of Jesus Christ. There are other things. But this passage says, no bridle, no bit, then the person's not converted. We'll return to this issue later. What then is meant by bridling the tongue? It doesn't mean this. And we don't want any of the children to think it does mean this. That if you, children, are asked by your father or mother a question that you don't want to answer, such as, I told you half an hour ago to sort that thing out and you haven't done it, why? Where's your homework? Or where have you been the last 2 hours? And you don't answer, and you say, I'm bridling my tongue. I'm bridling my tongue. I'm showing control. I'm controlling myself. I'm bridling my tongue. I heard about it at church on Sunday that I was to control my tongue, and I'm controlling my tongue by not waggling it and telling you why I didn't do that or where I've been. I have my tongue fully under control. I'm going to say nothing. Well, that's not obeying James 1 verse 26. You are indeed controlling your tongue. You can't be faulted there for a lack of bridling your tongue, but you're committing other sins. Or if a student at school or university, or a church member being spoken to by elders, or an employee before his employer is asked a fair and reasonable question, or even if a policeman asks you a question and you say no comment, and maybe there are occasions where you're at least within your rights legally to say that, but we're not now dealing with bridling one's tongue so as to keep James 1 verse 26. And in the examples I've mentioned, the issues are brought up such as stubbornness. You know, if your employer asks you a reasonable question, you should answer them. And especially if it's your teacher. And then the fifth commandment crops in here too, because it says, honor your father and mother, which means submission and obedience. And you ought to be able to explain what you've been doing. Otherwise, you get into the issue prohibited by the ninth commandment, deception. So bridling one's tongue is not shutting up shop and no commenting. Bridling one's tongue is controlling it so that we do not utter impatient words. That's a hard one, isn't it? Or angry words. Or words that are spiteful or bitter. The sort of words, impatient, angry, bitter, spiteful, which, if spoken of repeatedly in a marriage, could lead you all the way to a divorce court. So you bridle your tongue there. And you do more than bridle your tongue. You say, what's the problem with my heart? And you mortify the sins there that are rising up from within and causing you to have to bridle the tongue so that you don't say what's in your heart. You bridle your tongue against words of rebellion and words of complaint, at least the whingy, grumbling sort. I mean, there are times where you do have to complain, and you can complain legitimately in certain circumstances with your tongue fully bridled. You certainly must bridle your tongue against uttering swear words and filthy speech. And while we're at it, we must bridle our tongue so that we not let boastful words escape. Words whereby we talk up ourselves and our own achievements or those close to us, and then we bathe in the reflected glory of them. James 3, which we read, talks about the unruly, untamable tongue. The bridle is necessary to govern the tongue so that we don't engage in that miserable but beloved activity of gossiping or in slandering. And then we go to the stage where we bridle the tongue so we not only don't do certain things, we bridle the tongue, bring it under the rule, the gracious rule of Jesus Christ, so that we utter words which are true, edifying, kind words, and even words whereby we can build one another up. The Heidelberg Catechism in Lord's Day 43 deals with this subject when it asks, what is required in the ninth commandment? That I bear false witness against no man, nor falsify another's words. That I be no backbiter, nor slanderer. That I do not judge, nor join in condemning any man rashly or unheard. But that I avoid all sorts of lies and deceit as the proper works of the devil, and he can keep them. Unless I would bring down upon me the heavy wrath of God, and we don't want that. Likewise, that in judgment and in all other dealings I love the truth, speak it uprightly, and confess it. Also that I defend and promote, as much as I am able, the honour and good character of my neighbour. So when this text says, if a man among you seemeth to be religious, but bridleth not his tongue, it's not merely speaking of over-talkableness or talkativeness. So if you have a Christian and that person, male or female, is a voluble, talkative sort of person, that person's not saved. Well, in general, and there are a lot of proverbs about this, saying too much is foolish and rude. But it doesn't mean that someone's outside the kingdom of heaven, any more than somebody who's very quiet is very holy thereby. If we have a child, there's that sort of child that wants to tell her mother about everything that's just happened in the last hour, or even everything that occurred that day at school. we don't exclude them from the kingdom of heaven. Or if we have an adult that really thinks that they're filled with a lot of wisdom and that everybody ought to listen to them and they like the sound of their own voice, that's reprehensible behaviour, all right, but it doesn't mean they should be excommunicated. Bridling the tongue, especially against evil, sinful speech, bridling the tongue so that, and this is implied, it says good, edifying things. It's under control by the Spirit, not only so that we don't do this, but we do the good. And then the issue of why we must bridle our tongue crops up here. We don't bridle our tongues merely because that there are ambiguous and vague laws out there called hate laws that are so broad that if you said something that somebody could interpret as offensive or hurtful or annoying, that you might find yourself hauled before the local magistrate. Although, true enough, in some circumstances it might be better to bridle your tongue even in that sense too. Bridling the tongue not merely because if I don't, I'll get into trouble, although that in some circumstances is a good idea why you shouldn't say certain things. And not even because if I say what I really think, though what I think isn't actually wrong, it might help my promotion prospects at work. But the bridling of the tongue here is explicitly religious. We bridle the tongue because we're mindful of the grace of God that has saved us from sin and misery. The great love of Jesus Christ in laying down his life for me as a sheep. And I do love my neighbour, not as much sinfully as myself, but I do love my neighbour for Jesus Christ's sake. So I control my tongue, says the Christian. And when we even explain what bridling the tongue means and doesn't mean, the believer instinctively feels his own sins, that he has uttered sinful words, far more sinful words than he'd ever care to remember, and uttered them with the wrong motivation too. And so James 3 is very solemn and wise in verse 2 when he says, "In many things we offend all." In many things we offend all. And then he mentions, of course, our speech. If any man offend not in word, here is an area where we offend in many things, and hence offend all. But if any man offend not in word, that is, he's able to control and bridle his tongue, the same as a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. The point is that if you can control your tongue, which is some doing, then you can control your hands and your eyes and your feet as to where you go, and your whole body, because the tongue is the most difficult bodily part to govern. That's the first factor mentioned in this text. Distinctive, characteristic mark, as in this verse that describes the false professor. And there is a second fatal flaw in this person. Not only the unbridled tongue, but also a deceived heart. And I want you to notice this. The text does not say, if any man among you seems to be religious and bridles not his tongue, this man's religion is vain. It says, if any man among you seems to be religious, and one bridleth not his tongue, but two deceives his own heart, then this man's religion is vain. So we return to the subject of self-deception, which James, in this most practical of epistles, has already mentioned and will mention again. Verse 21, be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Here he is, a few more verses, deceiving yourselves, deceiving your own heart. And we said earlier in that first text that the worst person to deceive in this world is is yourself. And the self-deception spoken of in this verse is not merely self-deception in general, or self-deception regarding various things, that I deceive myself into thinking that I'm very attractive or very wise. Well, I'm not. But the self-deception spoken of here is a very specific self-deception in this text. Namely, I can say all these evil things with my unbridled tongue and still be not merely a good Christian, but this verse, and still actually be a Christian. That's what the text is saying. If any man seem to himself or herself to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceives his own heart, that is, still thinks he's religious, or she's a Christian, well, that person's religion is utterly worthless. That's what the text is saying. There is a form of this self-deception which can even hit us as true as Christians. Namely, someone can be a true Christian, but not certainly at the highest part of his game, who thinks, well, I can just rage and storm at people. I just let it all hang out when I lose my temper and slander people and grumble and complain. And you know what? It doesn't really even affect my walk in life, because God doesn't care about all these things. I can still live by faith in Jesus Christ, and I can put my suit on a Sunday, and I can smile at the people on the street, and I think that I'm still doing okay spiritually. But you can't. You can't. And even a true Christian whose tongue walks throughout all the earth and says evil stuff needs to repent and catch himself or herself on and go to the cross of Jesus and mortify the tongue, that evil, unruly member. But here we're talking about somebody who is deeply, thoroughly deceived as to his own standing before God and is lost. In the deceived heart, in the absolute sense dealt with and spoken of in this text, the deceived heart may fool itself in various ways. And here are some lies which such a person could tell himself or herself. And then when I say them from the pulpit, you say to yourself, because I can feel what you're going to respond to these things, but nobody really would actually believe that. That's so obvious. Yeah, it is from a pulpit when you say it out loud, but the heart of man is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, and you'd be surprised at what other people believe and what things that we believe too. Here's one. My deeds are important. God is interested in what I do. But my words, they're maybe only 10% as important, or 5%. In fact, they're utterly negligible. They don't really matter. And James here has been telling us that we must be doers of the word. And I'm very active in the church world, so I'm okay. I do a lot for the church. I do a lot to help my fellow saints. I don't help the ones that are run down so much now, but they didn't hear what I had to say about them, so it doesn't really matter. Here's another one. I have Christian liberty and freedom in Jesus. You sure do. And verse 25 speaks about Christian liberty. It certainly does. And therefore, I have liberty to say whatever I jolly well want. We sang about that in Psalm 12. Our tongues are ours, who's Lord over us. That's not Christian liberty. Christian liberty isn't saying what you want, or doing what you want, or kicking anybody that you want. Christian liberty is the freedom from the bondage of sin and misery, deliverance from hell and Satan, so that you're able to serve the Lord. You can say whatever you want, and you can do precisely what you want, as long as it's biblical. as long as it's the will of God and Jesus Christ for you. If your wants are correct, by all means, do whatever you want. Love God with all your heart and do whatever you want. Because if you do love God with all your heart, whatever you want will be the right thing. So love God and do whatever you want. I'm okay, even though my tongue rages like a fury, and it's like some of the fires that coursed through Australia in recent weeks. I'm okay because I'm in the church. I'm in the church. And the church is the community of the saints. So I'm okay. But verse 26 says, if any man among you, that is, in the church, professing believers, if any man among you seems to himself to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. So it doesn't really matter if you're in the church. That's no guarantee of your salvation. This doesn't make you immune. So I'm in the church, therefore I can just say whatever I want about whomever I want, whatever way I want, no more than you can do in any other area of the Christian life, whatever you sinfully want. One more. I'm okay with whatever I say because I am a worshipper. I'm a worshipper. I go to church not only, but when I'm there, I sing. I'm not one of these mumblers. And I'm even there in good time so that I do the wee prayer 5 or 10 minutes beforehand, which incidentally is a good idea. This is implied, this worship, especially in its external sense, because the word religious or religion, found 3 times in verses 26 and 27, many reckon carries the word fear, which carries over to worship, and especially external worship. So if any man among you thinks himself to be religious, a worshipper of God with the saints in the church, but still if he doesn't bridle his tongue, and he deceives himself, he could spend the whole day in church. And we could lock him inside between the morning and evening service, but he says, I just love to be here. And it won't do any good. And this raises the intriguing and important question, is the self-deceived person 100% deceived? That is the hypocrite in the church, we'll look at other people who are self-deceived in a moment, but is the self-deceived person in the church, the hypocrite, is he fully convinced that he's going to heaven? Or is she always sure that they belong to Jesus Christ? Is that person confident at every level that God has forgiven them all their sins? And the answer is no. I could prove that in various ways. I'll just use one argument. The keys of the kingdom of heaven. The keys of the kingdom of heaven. The first key, the preaching of the gospel. When it is declared that those who believe in Jesus are saved and those who don't are outside the kingdom, God uses that word to show the people which side of the gate they are on. It's not an ineffectual key. People know, they really do know, and they know at the very least. Sometimes it's very clear, and at a certain level, and especially when the keys are being wielded, they know. Such a person knows that they're lost, and their conscience condemns them. You see, it's a difficult challenge for various organizations to convince people of the lie. It's difficult. The false church has this great difficulty. I'm almost tempted to say I feel for them. They have this great difficulty. Think, for instance, of the Church of Rome. false church, special operation of Satan, as our Reformed fathers rightly said. And yet they have to actually convince the priest, an unbeliever, and the people in the pews, all unbelievers, they have to convince them they have a product to sell, that you're actually okay in the sight of God. And in comes the sacramental system. The masses, including the Requiem Mass for the dead. In comes baptismal regeneration. No, but you're born again with baptism. And even if you die and you're not feeling terribly hopeful, there'll be masses and prayers offered for you by the church. Keep on trusting. Stick with the Institute. The Virgin Mary's praying for you. The saints in heaven. You have some good works there. The Pope, his heart's going out towards you too. There's a hierarchy. Trust us. Trust us. One big effort to salve the conscience and convince people that they're all right before God. That at the end of the day, they won't be punished by God for their sins. And the cults and the pagan religions have the same thing. We have authoritative leaders. Trust these oracles that they got from heaven, these holy books, our traditions, this religion that has been going on for so long. But the fear is always there. There's never any certainty. It's not possible. And the only certainty is there, the nagging and correct fear that they're not right with God at all. And now Western secularism, to convince people that there is no God and that there's no need to worry, they don't have to get right with God through Jesus Christ, has to push evolutionism hard. Basically ram it down your throat. And the chief proponents, the most dedicated, labour to eradicate the knowledge of Jesus Christ at every level as fast as they can get away with it. When the gospel of grace comes in, we'll substitute secular psychology. If anybody fears about where the world is headed and the return of Jesus Christ and judgment, we'll tell them, worry about an ice age that's coming. We're going to run out of minerals and precious metals. The ozone layer, we're all going to be fried. The world is going to warm up. Or the latest one, climate is changing. I mean, some of these things might be true to some extent. I don't know, it's not even my job from the pulpit. My point is to say that these are displaced fears to keep people from believing the one message that they actually can, by the grace of God, do something about, and the one thing they should be scared about. Namely, death, or the return of Jesus Christ with the holy angels to burn up the whole world. Global warming. And our point is that at the end of the day, everybody knows God rules. Everyone knows that He must be worshipped and thanks. Everyone knows that there is a judgment and that God will hold every man to account. And the last few sentences weren't something I invented. That is the teaching of Romans 1 verses 18 to 32, which Reverend McGowan has preached on from this pulpit over the last few months when he was up here. Everyone knows that. Ineradicably implanted in every human being. The seed of religion. To be human, you know there is a God. Everyone knows. And Mr. Dawkins knows too. He knows. And that's important because the Bible teaches that no one is left without excuse. There'll be no one who will say in the judgment day, but I didn't know if there was a God. I just didn't know. And it's the same thing with the hypocrite in the church. Not only did he know there was a God and that the Christian religion was true, but he knew that he didn't believe. he deceived his own heart. But he didn't deceive his own heart all the time and at all levels. He or she knows full well. And verse 26 says that if anyone among you in the church thinks himself to be religious or a Christian or a believer, but doesn't, one, bridle his tongue, and two, he deceives himself, thinking that he is a believer, at whatever level he deceives himself, this man's religion is vain, utterly useless and completely of no spiritual or eternal benefit whatsoever, as vain and useless as an idol. No forgiveness of sins, that's how vain. No righteousness of God reckoned to that person's account. No saving knowledge of the Lord Jesus. No everlasting life. So vain and useless was that person's religion that all the while they were in church claiming to be Christians and worshippers of God, they were under God's wrath. So at death, they're cut off and go to the same place as the rich man in the parable in Luke 16, and after the judgment day are cast into the lake of fire forever. That is vain. That is useless. That's their religion. And that's what James is saying. Now, last week, beloved, I spoke about James 1's treatment of regeneration. That begins in verse 18. Of God's own will begat he us with the word of truth. The begat is to generate. Same thing as being born again. Of God's own will, he regenerated us with the word of truth. I pointed out that this message about regeneration, this truth is to be borne in mind as regards the preaching too. Now we're running through the verses following verse 18. Because it's the same word that we hear in preaching that God used at the very start to bring to life the seed implanted in us at regeneration. And we noted that James has important things to say about what we do before the preaching, during the preaching, immediately after the preaching, and longer term after the preaching, because we bear in mind that it's the same word preached as regenerated me. So at our grasp, this is the point of James, our grasp of the truth of regeneration and how we use that truth biblically impacts the way in which we receive the word and how much we benefit from the preaching, and it affects how we do the word, obeying what we hear from the pulpit. And so I said last time that regeneration isn't only the subject of verse 18, part of which I quoted a few moments ago, but is the subject from 18, 19, 20, all the way up to verse 25. And now we're saying that we haven't left regeneration. Regeneration is the backdrop also for verse 26. So it's 18 to 26. I'll give you a clue for next week, Lord willing. It's verse 27 as well. And there are some commentators that isolate verses 26 and 27, and they say, here are these two verses that sort of stand alone. But the more you think about it, as I've been doing the last few weeks, I don't believe that's really the case at all. I want to prove and explain this to you, first of all, regarding the first of the two marks of the hypocrite mentioned in verse 26, bridling the tongue. Remember the question we asked earlier. Why does James mention the failure to bridle the tongue as exposing the false professor? I mean, he had such a wide scope, he could have picked anything almost. Why didn't he? Why this one? Well, if you page back, at least in my Bible you have to page back, to verse 19, Verse 18 said, of his own will begat he us with the word of truth. Verse 19 gives three exhortations. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear the preaching, slow to speak. The context is slow to speak against the preaching. And third, slow to wrath, so that you don't get angry at the word of God expounded and applied. But now look again at the second and third points made in verse 18. Slow to speak, slow to wrath. That deals with someone who has a lack of control regarding their speech and temper during and after the preaching. Are we to think that someone who can't control what they say about the preaching during and after it is somebody who then can bridle their tongue with regard to other things that they may say? Or is it not rather the case that if you get somebody who's forever slandering or criticizing the preaching, that it's not just intemperance and a lack of a bridle there, but just across the whole gamut? The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity that spreads its destructive power. James has been arguing in the second half of this chapter that regeneration means that we must hear the word. Remember the refrain? As the same word that God used to regenerate us. We must hear the word preached with that knowledge, and we must do the word. Well, godly speech, that is, bridling the tongue so it doesn't do the bad stuff but does the good stuff, utters positive things. Godly speech is actually part of doing the word. The self-deception earlier, one of them I mentioned was, but I can do all these things. I do these things. But words, no. The words are part of what you do. And doing is, when it speaks here about doing the words, that definitely includes you do the word, because the word tells you not only, help your neighbour, but doing the words includes the 9th commandment, which involves your speech. And remember too that regeneration by its very nature is the implanting within us of godly spiritual power that enables us to control ourselves and to do the will of God. Regeneration. Out of the heart the mouth speaks. Out of a regenerated heart the tongue will say good things. Although since there's also the flesh, there's going to be some evil things too. So don't, believer, when you see some evil speech, don't immediately go home tonight and say, that's it, I'm finished, I'm through. I can remember some sinful things that I said. Of course you can. We all can. What then about the second damning indictment of the false professor mentioned in our text? Because he not only bridleth not his tongue, but he also deceiveth his own heart. How does that relate to regeneration? Is that not a stretch? No, it's not. Regeneration is itself the gift of the new heart. That's the teaching of Ezekiel 36, verse 26. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh, a new spiritual heart. A heart of flesh that's tender and responsive to the Word of God. Whereas the false professor, he deceives his own heart because he doesn't have the new heart. And when it says deceiveth his own heart, well, what is the instrument that God uses in this second aspect of regeneration, mentioned in James 1 verse 18? Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth. With the word of truth. Someone's hardly going to be going around deceiving their own heart if regeneration is a new heart, and God begets us using the word of truth. Because people regenerated by the word of truth are not liars. They're not self-deceived. Let's wind it up by stating simply and clearly our calling as God's regenerated children. James 1 is telling us we're to listen to and read the word. Here's the mantra, as the same word that God used in the beginning of our Christian lives to regenerate us. Then we hear the word and we do the word. And that involves bridling or controlling our tongue against the evil and for the good, so that we speak God's truth to others and we speak it to our own hearts. Amen. Our Father in heaven, help us to remember what we hear and to be doers of it. Forgive our own sins. We don't control our tongues the way we ought. We don't even control anything of ourselves as we should. There's no good in us but the grace put in us at that regeneration. Strengthen and renew the goodwill, and bless us the remainder of this day, going with us into the week to come. For Jesus Christ's sake, our Lord. Amen.